Okay, in this video we're going to talk about parallel and perpendicular lines and how their slopes are related. So you can see real quickly a couple of notes to copy down. The big focus though is, of course, what's bolded there. Parallel lines will always have identical slopes. And again, that's because they're increasing or decreasing at the same rate. Perpendicular lines, on the other hand, have slopes that are opposite and reciprocals. And just to give you an example of what two opposite reciprocal numbers might look like. So if one slope is, let's say, 3/4, the opposite reciprocal to 3/4 would be negative. That's the opposite part. The reciprocal part would be the 4/3 part. So those two numbers are opposite reciprocals. Take one other number, like a whole number, 3. Remember, any whole number you can write over 1. So opposite reciprocal to 3/1 is negative 1/3. All right, so let's look at an example. Pause if you need to. And I've already got the steps kind of outlined here, but we want to determine whether the line given, which you'll notice is already in slope-intercept form, we want to figure out if this line is parallel, perpendicular, or neither to this line. So step 1 says we need to identify the slope of each line that you're comparing. You may have to isolate y in one or both equations. Well, this first one is already in slope-intercept form. So we can see pretty quickly the slope for this first line is negative 3/1. And I'm going to get in the habit of just putting, if it's a whole number, putting it over 1, because that's going to make things a little bit easier when we're graphing. We don't really care about the y-intercept when we're just determining whether it's parallel, perpendicular, or neither. And then graph the other one is 6x plus 2y equals 1. So this one we need to isolate the y variable. So I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides. Remembering to write the term with the x first to keep it in slope-intercept form, and then dividing all three terms here by 2. So here's our other equation, so we can see pretty quickly the slope of this other equation is negative 3. So we can see, and let's write it as a fraction, negative 3/1. And we can see pretty quickly those slopes are identical. So since those slopes are identical, that means these two lines are parallel. So actually what I have written there in that text box, that is the correct answer. Let's go ahead and graph this one since they give us a graph. So the first equation has a starting point of 4. And the slope is negative 3/1, so that means we're going down 3, right 1. And the other graph, I'm just going to do 2 points. The other graph starts at 1/2, has a y-intercept of 0.5, but we're still going down 3, right 1. And it's helpful to graph them sometimes just to verify that you've got the slope rules right. And you can see that these two lines are not going to intersect if you use a nice straight edge. If you just freehand it like I did on part of the line, it may look like they're going to intersect, but of course they won't. All right, let's do one more example. Same thing here. We want to determine whether the two lines given are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So step 1, identify the slopes of each line. This second equation, I'm going to go and do this one first just because I see it's already in slope-intercept form. So the slope is positive 1/2. Again, really the slope is all we care about. The other one, we need to solve this one for y. This one's pretty simple because there's not a number other than 1 in front of the y variable. So all we have to do is subtract 2x from both sides. And then we see pretty quickly the slope is right there in front of the x term, so the slope is -2. So we look at these two numbers, +1/2 and -2. And we ask ourselves, are they opposites? That answer is yes. One is positive, one is negative. Then we ask, are they a reciprocal? Yes, because remember, reciprocals are just two fractions that where the numerator and denominator are flipped. If it helps, write -2/1 so you can see the numerator and denominator have been flipped. So since both of those things are true, these two lines are perpendicular. And again, we always want to actually write our answer saying these two lines are parallel or perpendicular and give the reason. All right, pause the video here in about 5 seconds. I'm going to show the answer to the first year term. So there's the work on this one. The slope for part A had a slope of +2. The slope for the second line was -1/2. So one is positive, one is negative, and they are flipped versions of each other. So those two lines are perpendicular. Pause the video again, and I'll show the answer to part B here in just a couple of seconds. All right, so the answer to this one was neither, because the two slopes ended being -3 and +3, while those two numbers are opposites of each other. They are not reciprocals. So they're not the same, obviously, and they're not opposite and reciprocals. Be careful here. Remember, there is an assumed -1 in front of the y right there. So a lot of times, I think folks remember to subtract 3x from both sides, but then forget to solve for positive y and forget to divide everything by -1 in that last step.